Ready? All right, we'll give you the easiest question first. Your name?
Yeah, Tom Gingrich,
All right, spell it.
Gingrich.
Okay, and what title do you want to go officially
Yeah,
by?
State Farm Insurance Agent.
Okay, cool. All right, so obviously we don't have any storms happening here right now. So we always, in the meteorology, stress time to prepare. From the insurance aspect of things, what should people be doing now while we don't have any threats coming our way to prepare should they have to put a claim in afterwards?
Okay, I think the most important thing right now is to make sure that you have your insurance house in place. So that would be a great time to meet with your insurance professional. Just make sure that you know what you're covered for, and sometimes more importantly, what you're not covered for. It's always a good time to just sit down and look to make sure that the coverages are appropriate, that your replacement costs on your house is appropriate. We've had an increase in construction costs, and inflation has really heightened the need to make sure that the replacement cost and the coverage amount on your house insurance is accurate. Also, just make sure that you know what your deductibles are. I always tell people that the most important insurance policy that you have at a time of a loss is the one that's in force. So make sure that you have everything in force, make sure that you're paid up. Also recommend just making sure that the mortgage company, if you have one, is listed appropriately. And just make sure that you understand what the deductibles are. A lot of times at a time of storm, the deductible is a little bit higher. So just make sure that there's money set aside in the event that you do have a claim, that you have enough money to absorb that deductible. Other than that, it's always a good time just to take a look, make sure that you have the auto insurance policy in place, the homeowner's policy in place. Make sure that you understand that flood insurance is excluded on a homeowner's insurance policy. So if you're thinking about or have been talking to your insurance professional about flood insurance, that you consider putting that in place sooner than later. There is a 30-day wait period on flood insurance. So when a storm is out on the coast, a lot of times that's way too late to start thinking about putting a policy in place. So just
Explain a little bit about flood insurance. Why is it different? And I know the old saying was, it depends on where the water came from. If it came from the roof or came from the ground. What is the difference in that flood insurance?
Yeah, so the homeowner's insurance policy is going to provide protection for things such as flooding from inside the home, a water pipe burst. That's going to be a homeowner's insurance policy. Typically, anything that is related to surface water is going to be under a flood insurance policy. Again, a specific exclusion on the house insurance that will not provide any coverage for the surface water flooding. I tell people that every structure is in a flood zone. It's just a matter of how significant of a risk that particular location is. So we experienced in Hurricane Florence a lot of people who did not feel as if they were in a flood zone or a high-risk flood zone.
Because their mortgage may not have required them to get it.
Exactly. If you're in what's referred to as an X zone, if you have a mortgage, the mortgage company will not require you to have that policy. If you're in this area in what's referred to as an AE zone, then the mortgage company, if you have one, is going to require you to have the flood insurance policy. If you don't have a mortgage, you're not required to have any insurance. However, I tell people if it rains at your house, you should strongly consider flood insurance. And we experienced that in Hurricane Florence.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep. And it's also important to recognize that the flood insurance policy is written directly through the National Flood Insurance Program. Different carriers may be a servicing agent for that particular policy. Also important to note that the most coverage you can get on a flood insurance policy for the dwelling is $250,000, and the most you can get for contents is $100,000. But the important thing, critical, is there's a 30-day wait period in most situations from the time you do an application until the policy takes effect. So the sooner you do that, it's going to be too late at the time when the hurricane is in the Atlantic to put a policy in place and have it effective.
Because I was going to say, that was one of the myths I always heard was once they, quote, name a storm, then there's a freeze. So it's the 30-day period, not necessarily the naming of the storm.
That is correct. Yeah, and it's important also to note, you bring up a great point, is that with any insurance company, once a storm is named, there's going to be restrictions in what you can do to your policy. So if you don't have, for example, comprehensive coverage on your auto insurance policy, which would cover you for hail, flooding, If you, at the time that a storm is named, you want to add that coverage to your policy, there's going to be writing restrictions that prevent an insurance professional from putting coverage onto your car or making adjustments to your deductibles on your house.
Gotcha. Cool. What about taking the time to document things now?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. A lot of people ask me from the perspective of your personal contents, how is a claim handled, and should I itemize every single thing that I own? I tell them the more documentation that you have, the better. I recommend, just to be reasonable, even if you just take your cell phone and go room to room, take a video, open your closet, take a video. That's going to help you have a better understanding as to what you actually have. Anybody who has ever experienced a large loss is going to tell you it's a pretty traumatic time. So the ability to remember everything that you have is going to be very difficult. So just being able to reference a video is going to be helpful in that regard.
What about if you have like a large collection, like I'm a large model train collector, or coins, or valuable cars or something? Mm-hmm. That's not included 9 times out of 10 as far as replacement costs are concerned, correct?
Right. Yeah, you're going to have some coverage under your homeowner's policy, and that's why it's real important to sit down with your insurance professional. If you have large items or collectibles, you may consider itemizing those on a separate, we call it a personal articles policy. For large collectibles, there's broader coverage most times on those types of policies, so that's why it's critically important to sit down now with your insurance company, your insurance agent, just to go over the things that you might have a concern about, making sure that you have the proper coverage for them.
Let's say a tree falls into my house, kind of deal, and I've got a break during bands of rain or whatever. Should I go out there and take that off the house if it's safe to do it? Or will that change the ability for me to put a claim in later?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what I advise people to do, number one, safety is the most critical. So don't do anything that's going to jeopardize your health or safety. If there are things that you can do, the most important part is just document everything. Take photographs of everything. You do have a responsibility to do the best you can to mitigate the damage. So if there is damage during the storm, let's say you have a hole in your roof from a tree, the responsibility as quickly as you can is to arrange to get the tree first removed from the house, and then the damage, to mitigate the damage, to somehow tarp the roof to prevent further damage from happening. What happens during a catastrophe, it can be very chaotic. There's a lot of people in town. There's a lot of out-of-state license plates in town. A lot of people coming in trying to offer assistance. Just be very cautious about that. Just want to make sure that everything that you're doing, you're documenting. Anything that you pay or contract for, that you are getting information on who it is that is doing the work. Get receipts. Save everything, but photographs, document. It's the most important thing. Even when it comes to the labor that you're extending yourself. So if after a storm you're going around the house and you're bailing water, or you are tarping a roof, save the receipts for the materials, but also document the amount of time that you are spending doing that, because that can be presented to your insurance company for consideration for the payment of your labor. You might not get paid what you think your labor is worth, but nonetheless, they'll take that into consideration.
I've never thought about that aspect of it. Okay, so now let's go to the aftermath. Obviously, again, we saw it here in 2018 as far as Florence was concerned. How does the process work on the back end of it? Obviously, you're going to get a crush of a lot of, claims coming in. And I'm sure, like you say, sometimes big company like yours, they'll send in, claim group from other places. How does that process work on the backside after the storm?
Yeah, and that's a great question. From the perspective of yourself, it's always recommended have your insurance documentation ready. So have that in your emergency kit, have that sealed so that it's protected. And that's going to be your insurance policies, your insurance policy numbers, the contact information for your agent or for the insurance company to file a claim as quickly as you possibly can. That's the most important thing. Get in line. The next thing is to be patient. There's going to be an awful lot of claims, and not everybody can be seen first. So we do the best we can. There's going to be safety concerns for the adjusters that are being deployed, so it's going to take time to get them situated and get them on a triage type of a situation. The insurance company does everything they can to contact everybody. We triage it from the uninhabitable, most significant damage first, down to the less significant. So just be patient with that. But the first thing you want to do is just report the claim. Report it to your insurance company. And make sure you know how to do that, whether it's an application, whether it's a website, whether it is a 1-800 number, whether it's just walking into your local insurance agent's office. But get that claim reported. And then in the meantime, just be patient and do what you can to, again, mitigate the damage. If there is a tree on your house, which we saw a lot of during Hurricane Florence, be very cautious, because there's going to be a lot of tree removal companies out there that are going to offer assistance. Just be reasonable with it. It's going to make sure that you have an understanding as to what they are going to charge you prior to removing the tree from the house, because we sometimes run into a lot of surprises when a tree is removed from the house and they're hit with a very large bill. Insurance company is going to pay a reasonable amount to remove a tree, and we take into account the catastrophic, chaotic nature of a major hurricane when we analyze that. So we're going to do the best we can to give the benefit of the doubt to the policyholder.
Let's see. That was a very good answer. I like that there. You mentioned about how quickly you should get contact immediately. What is the difference between cash value and replacement value on your policy?
Okay, and that's a great question. That's another reason to meet with your insurance agent to determine what type of policy that you have. A replacement cost policy is one that is going to pay to replace the damage to your home to the same pre-loss condition with new materials, new construction, and labor costs associated with that. So they're going to pay, if you have a roof that is damaged, they're not going to depreciate it, they're going to replace it. There may be some items on an estimate that is depreciated. Actual cash value, on the other hand, takes the replacement cost and then deducts any depreciation. That becomes the actual cash value. When it comes, I answer a lot of questions when claims are filed about how is a homeowner's insurance claim, what does the process look like? So I tell people that the claim process from a payment perspective is typically a 2-payment process. Because it's a replacement cost policy, an adjuster is going to come out and meet with you and or your contractor, determine what the scope of damage is and what that estimate of repair is. And then they're going to show you the replacement cost minus the depreciation, and they're going to write the first check for that actual cash value dollar figure, because replacement has not yet been done. So that gives money in the hands of you so that you can start paying your contractor. Then once it is determined that the replacement is completed, whether it's an inspection or whether it's showing invoices and contract repairs, then the insurance company will then release the second payment, which is the release of that originally held back depreciation to now make you whole on the replacement cost. So don't be concerned when that first check comes and it's lower than the replacement cost. There's more checks coming as long as the work is done.
Gotcha.
If a customer, and we experienced this with Florence, if a customer decides that they're not going to do the repair, they're just going to abandon the house and leave, then the insurance company would pay the actual cash value because replacement has not been done, and there's never going to be that second replacement cost check.
Gotcha. That's a good point. North Carolina, I know we've got this whole thing with wind and hail. They explained why do we split it between wind and hail and this versus that type of damage,
right,
when you're talking Mother Nature.
Yeah, exactly. And that's when I talk about making sure you know what policies that you have and how they're handled. Wind and hail is the critical, and it's really the most expensive policy that we see on the homeowner side here in Eastern North Carolina. Every company is always taking a look at what their market share is in a particular area, because they want to make sure that in the event of a Cat 5 hurricane that does mass destruction, that they're just not overextended on the market share. So what a lot of companies are doing now is they are writing 2 policies. They'll write one policy through the parent company, which will be for your fire, theft, lightning, your traditional causes of loss. But then they'll exclude the wind and the hail, and then the wind and the hail would be picked up under a separate policy. In North Carolina, we have what's referred to as the North Carolina Insurance Underwriting Association, which is really for the coastal counties of North Carolina that provide, for the most part, wind coverage. It's important to make sure that you understand how those policies apply, that you understand how the deductibles apply. Typically on a wind-hail policy, there's going to be a little bit of a higher deductible. It might be a percentage deductible, and it's a percentage not of the loss, but a percentage of the value that the home is insured for. So just making sure how those deductibles apply, what it's going to boil down to on a dollar and cents for you as an individual homeowner, and making sure that you have that money set aside in savings so that you can use that to pay contractors so that you have the ability to get the home repaired.
Gotcha. And I guess the last question is, obviously we got a lot of transitory people coming and going with the military and all through here. What would be your best advice of somebody just coming into the market now, right before hurricane and the severe weather season, as far as insurance is concerned?
Yeah, I would recommend hooking up with a local agent, a local insurance professional who understands this market area, can explain to you the differences, the nuances between what you might be accustomed to from the state in which you are moving to, and how things are a little bit different and unique here in Eastern North Carolina.
Cool. Anything else you want to add that we didn't cover?
No, I would just, encourage, number one, safety first.
Yeah.
And just make sure that you're taking care of your family. Make sure you have an evacuation plan in place. Make sure you have an emergency kit set up. And make sure that prior to the storm that you're taking reasonable measures to protect loose items that are in your yard. There's no better way to make enemies with a neighbor than to not secure your grill, your trash bins, your trampolines, your swing sets. And also just make sure that if you have trees that have dead branches, that you are taking measures to cut those trees down or remove those dead branches, because in times of storms, those become missiles and can create a lot of damage.